Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. Today, as promised, what I'm going to do is walk you through a little bit of how to do research. I kind of started this in the previous video when I was talking about the annotated bibliography assignment for the Beast. But in this video, what I'm going to be doing is walking you through some of the tips and tricks that I use when it comes to doing my research. I'll get right to it after another sip of coffee. So this is particularly helpful when you're doing research on the library databases. So I'm going to open up the library databases and I'm going to basically pretend that I'm writing on a topic. So let's open this up. RCC library. All right, and I'm going to go to databases A to Z. In these databases, there's a lot of different databases you can choose from. I'm using Academic Search Complete. This is essentially kind of the Walmart of databases. You can get a lot of different kinds of things here. There are more specialty databases down below, and I would suggest you sort it by subject, maybe to give you an idea of what to see. But Academic Search Complete, let's go here. I'm going to log in. So this is my login information. Ooh, you can see my user ID. But it'll tell you how to log into the library databases so that not just any old person can use it. All right, so now I'm here. In the last video, I did a video on solar power because we were talking about the environment. Today, maybe let's try one on romantic relationships because I know a lot of students are writing about that. So maybe I'm writing on divorce. So I'm going to type in divorce here and see what comes up. Maybe what I'm going to try to look at is predictors of divorce or consequences of divorce. I don't know. Let's just see what pops up. Here's a good one. Divorce and adolescent academic achievement. Okay, so this one might be interesting. See here, I can sort by a couple different things on the side here. So for instance, I don't want something from 1887 from 2020. So let's just get stuff from the last 20 years. And I want full text because I want to be able to find the darn thing. And let's say scholarly peer-reviewed journals, see what shows up. Okay, so that still gives me 5,000 hits. Suffice it to say, there's a lot written on this subject. Okay, so I'm going to open this one up, actually, first I'm going to create. Here's my article here. This was on solar power, so I'm going to delete these. Let's just say I'm writing on divorce. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm creating a folder for all of my information that I'm going to be doing for research. And so I'm going to go here, PDF full text. See what that yields me. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of read a little bit of the first page just to see if it's even on something that I'm remotely interested in. Aim to investigate the possible heterogeneity in the association between divorce and adolescence, academic achievement, background education. All right, so it's looking at how divorce affects academic achievement of adolescents. Beast essay. All right, and again, one of the ways that I like to save my sources, just because otherwise it's really hard to find them later, is I look at what the title of the article is. So divorce and adolescent academic achievement. And then sometimes I don't try to write the whole thing off, but just the beginning of the title. And then I'll grab the first author's name and I'll write that. So in this case, it's Nilsson. And I'll save that. Now, I'm not going to look at that right now until a little bit later because I'm going to come back to it. Because if I basically read, if I get into the weeds and I just keep reading in one article, I'm going to lose steam. So what I'm going to do is just go find more research. I'm going to go back here. The spillover effect of divorce rates on marriage, findings from Turkey. That could be interesting. That's also interesting. Ooh, here we go. Improving court-mandated divorce education by recognizing the effects of parents' childhood trauma. This could be interesting. Let's look at this. Divorce education. I didn't even know that was a thing. See, you learn things when you're doing research. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this PDF. So it's, what is it? Improving court-mandated divorce education. Improving court-mandated divorce education. And the writer is, first one is Ferraro, so I'll say Ferraro. All right, there's another article that I got. Right there, in a few minutes, so say you were writing about divorce, you would already have enough to do the first annotated bibliography assignment, which is just read through those two articles and tell me a little bit about them. But I'm going to keep going because we're going to need a lot of sources. We're going to make a lot. We're going to need a lot more sources than that, and I don't know if everything that I'm reading is going to be useful. Parents making meaning of high conflict divorce might be interesting. Grab this too. Australian Journal of New England Family Therapy. All right, let me download. And who is the author? Treelor. All right. Let's find a few more. State of divorce law. This might be really interesting. It seems kind of in the weeds for somebody who's a little bit more an expert. Sometimes what you'll see with these research articles is that sometimes you kind of have to be an expert in the field to even understand what the heck it's talking about. And it may or may not be the most useful for you in your term paper. A lot of stuff about Turkey. That's interesting. Nigeria. I kind of want to focus on the United States. But so, for instance, if I wanted to look at how things work in other countries, that might be more interesting to me. This might be interesting. World culture and cross-national variation in divorces. What the heck? So, coming out of that number of us. And then so this is Lear. This is about gender discrimination in legal situations. All right, slow me down on this one too. This is Radulescu. Okay. So I found 5 sources on divorce right now from academic journal articles. So one of the things that you'll notice, though, is that sometimes academic journal articles are a little bit hard to read. So what I'm going to do is walk you through how to read one. Because here is the dirty little secret about research. Nobody reads the whole thing. And I mean, like, nobody reads the whole thing. Fun stuff. So here, let's look at this one. All right, so in this case, here's your research article, and this is a pretty standard research article. But I want to walk you through the best way to read a research article like this. So there are different types of or not different types, but there are different sections of a research article that you'll want to take a look at. Now, sometimes they have different names, which that can be somewhat difficult because you're thinking like, wait, how does that work? But they sort of follow the same sort of pattern, so I'll walk you through that. So the first thing you'll see is an abstract. So an abstract in an academic journal, art, we talk about abstract art meaning something that's sort of like out there and kind of hard to understand. That's not what an abstract is in an academic journal article. An abstract in an academic journal article is basically a summary. It is a summary of the article, and this is used to kind of tell people what the article is about, so to be honest, so they don't have to read it if they don't need to. So here, I'll show you the different abstracts in these articles. So in this case, this is what is called a structured abstract, which means that it's actually got a couple little subsections. They even summarize the different parts of the article, which is actually kind of cool. Maybe I'll show you a different one that'll be a little bit more like a traditional abstract. There you go. This is a very good example of an abstract. So in this case, if I'm reading through this, if you look at the end of the abstract, the article discusses elements of judicial practice, theoretical notions related to the best interests of minors, but also elements aimed at discrimination on the basis of nationality. Okay, so in this case, this tells you, hey, this is what this article's about. This is incredibly important for you to understand when you're reading an academic journal article, because if you read the abstract, this little tiny part, and it doesn't look like it's really on your topic, throw it in the bin. Find a different source. This is the first step of you understanding. Whether or not this is going to be a useful tool for you. This guy has a Hotmail account? Interesting. Okay. So that is the single most important part of an academic journal article that you want to read. Next is the introduction. Sometimes an introduction will be combined with a background or literature review, but let's just start with the introduction. So the introduction usually examines the topic of the article and establishes the problem to be studied. So by this, what I mean is each academic journal article is trying to add something to the academic conversation. There's some kind of problem that they're trying to examine or study, and an introduction will usually cover that. So let's take a look at this one that we were looking at. Okay, so introduction. So this is going to tell me about the topic that we're looking at. Read a little bit. Part of this is because I haven't read this. I'm doing this on the fly, so you can see this in real time. There's the dogs. This one's got kind of like a long and involved introduction. Let me look at another one to see if I can get a little bit more clearer example of one you'd see. Okay, so in this one, introductions. And how long does this go? Okay, this one's a little bit more. Clear. So what it's going to do is tell you a little bit about the topic. So what are we looking at? Why are we looking at it? What is some of this context? And then what specifically is this study going to examine? So here in the introduction, they talk about children and academics with divorced or separated parents are less well-adjusted on average. So they're saying, okay, children of divorced parents often have difficulties in physical and mental health and school, etc. It's providing some context. And then as we continue, one of the things they're doing is they're telling us some of what other people have said about the topic, including footnotes. And at the end of the introduction, they say, previous studies primarily have been conducted on British, US, and German samples, and it's uncertain whether previous findings generalize to other contexts. In keeping with the stated need for studies on more recent samples and in other cultural contexts, this study sought to investigate the potential heterogeneity in the association between parental divorce and adolescents' academic achievements within the elaborate Norwegian welfare state. Okay, so what they're saying is a lot of the other studies that have been done on this topic were done in Britain, the US, and Germany, and like 40 or 50 years ago. This study is going to do a lot more recent research in Norway. So they are saying, all right, this is the problem. We've looked at all these, people have looked at all these topics throughout history, and the problem is a lot of these studies are old and in different countries. We're doing this study on this country, or in this case, Norway, and it's going to be a new study. So this tells you a lot about the topic. In the same way, the introduction is super important for you to read. So the abstract and the introduction are your great places to start. Now, the next section is the literature review or background. Sometimes that's kind of combined with the introduction, but this is where the researchers will say, hey, look, we did a lot of research on this topic. And they bring in essentially everything relevant that people have already written about on the topic. So the literature review or background is when authors demonstrate that they've done their homework, showing what many people have already written about the topic. Again, this is, this text is too big. This is, or at least it can be, pause for dogs, a really helpful thing for you to reference as well, especially if you're trying to find more research. So let's take a look here. So we've got introduction and then, okay, so the Norwegian context. Now in this case, what they're going to do, they're breaking up their, so this one doesn't say background or literature review, but what it is saying is it's like, hey, look, we're going to be giving context on this topic. So this person's going through all of this stuff about Norway that might be useful for us to understand. Similarly, in this article, they're going through, in the introduction and these subsections, they're going to be giving some context on these background topics. So in this case, they're not talking at all about the study they're doing. They're just going through sort of the background information. Let's see. Do a little bit more over here. So here's this article's abstract. There's their intro. Here they're going through some background on gender and so this is a little bit of a shorter article, but they still have their introduction, then they have some background on sort of where they're coming from, and then they're jumping into oh, this is some more background actually. Right, and then they jump into how they're going to do the study. So this can also be a really helpful part. So like I said, the introduction and literature review, sometimes they're combined, but they're often really helpful for you to read to sort of figure out, okay, what's going on with this topic? What have people written about it? And it's also a great place for you to be able to find other sources because they're going to cite a lot of stuff on the topic. And you might be able to look up those other sources later separately and get some good information out of them. All right, next are methods and results. So method is a section where authors will describe how they did the study. So what is it that they were looking at and how did they look at it? So in this case, you can say, I'll show you. So here they're saying research questions. This is what they were going to ask about, like, and then research methods and study groups. So the methods is they're going to tell you, okay, how did we do this study? How did we look at the problem? And they're going to go through this. Now, a lot of times, this isn't super important for you to read. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the ones that you should read in green. Literature review and background, I'm going to highlight this in yellow because I don't think it's actually that important for you to read all the time. Sometimes it's important. Method, you can use, unless this source is really, really important, you can often skip this. Next is results. Oh my gosh, the dogs. So the results is authors will describe the raw data that they learned from the study. Both of these parts, I'm going to sort of throw a red light on or a pink light on. They're not that important. Because sometimes it's really technical and you aren't going to really be able to understand that much from it. So it's going to say over research findings. But where it starts getting really, really good, oh my gosh, those dogs are going to drive me to drink. Discussion. Okay. Discussion is when things start getting really good. Sometimes there's great stuff in the research findings, but the discussion section, which is often similar Sometimes it's separate from implication or conclusion. Sometimes it'll be called analysis. These are also really, really good things to read. Because this is where, and like I said, sometimes these will be the same, sometimes they'll be different. The discussion section is where authors will explain what their research means. Okay. In this case, they're going to say, all right, we did all this research, we found all this stuff out, this is what it means. This is what's probably going to be the most quotable for you. If you're trying to figure out, like, well, what do I cite in my paper? You're going to find quotes from the discussion and analysis section that's really going to be helpful. The conclusion or implication section, like I said, these two are often combined. So sometimes they're separate, sometimes they're the same. But this will also be basically implications or conclusions will overview key findings of the study. Both of these are quite quotable. So let's look at this. So let's look. High conflict divorce is not simply an individual or interpersonal problem. It's a complex process with a diversity of contributing factors and potential paths forward. My finding suggests a shift from professional authority and expertise to self-authorization and personal agency is central to transformation. So they're talking about like what happens when spouses sort of process this idea, or what it means to have a really high conflict divorce. All right, they say, okay, the support of counselors and therapists play a crucial role for many parents. All right, this might be something that's quotable. And then, okay, so in this case, this author actually does separate between discussion and conclusion. And again, you're going to find a lot more quotable stuff in this section. So that, I would say, read these sections because that's often where you're going to find the most quotable stuff, the most summarized key takeaways. You're not going to quote, oh my gosh. Dogs. Okay. Keep it together. You're going to find the most quotable and meaningful stuff in this section, in these two sections of the academic journal article. And then the last thing is the references page. References page can be super helpful because you might find other sources that you might want to steal. And so they're going to cite a bunch of stuff here. And some of these might be something that's really, really interesting for you to go look up later. I don't know. I'm not you, but that might be something that you might look at this and think, oh, wow, that source looks really good. Let me go find it. In fact, in my dissertation research, this is how I wrote half my dissertation, is that I just found good articles and then I cited who they cited and cited who they cited and cited who they cited. And sooner or later, I had 150 sources. Now, I'm not asking you to have 150 sources. I'm asking you to have 6. But this is still a good way for you to find sources. All right, so that's how to read an academic journal article, but then I'm going to do one more research hack in this video before I sign off here, and that is how I do my research journal, how I do my research journal. So if you're anything like most of us, what's happened to you before while you're doing research is you have 38,000 of these PDF windows open, and you can't remember who wrote what and where and when. And here is what I would suggest you do. So in my little folder here, where I've got all of these, these articles put together. What I will do is I will create another article or document. So I'm going to save this as, I'm going to say this is Beast Essay Research Journal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look through this article for quotes that I think might be interesting. So usually what I'll do is I'll grab the citation information up here just so I don't forget it later. All right, I'll put that there. And then what I do is I start looking for quotes that I want to use. By the way, it's typically not a good idea for you to look at the quote from the abstract. Yeah, a lot of this stuff isn't super neat, super juicy. Like I said, the most quotable stuff is usually in the discussions and the okay. Maybe this is a good quote. Okay, so this is talking about how participants feel, or like divorced parents feel really judged. All right, this might be a good quote for me to use. So I'm going to quote that here. And one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out what page number that was on. So that was on page 95. Okay. And I keep looking here to see if there's anything else that is interesting. I'm kind of playing around here because I'm not actually writing this paper, but okay, so this is talking about counselors. Those able to system complex. All right, so let's say this is a good. This is also page 95. So let's say this is a quote that I want to use. By the way, I'm quoting these big, long, fat quotes, but I might not use the whole quote but I just want to put it all there so I can use it, find it first, and then I'll use it later. Okay, so this quote here is talking about like what needs to change in the government because of this. All right, so these are 3 quotes that I think in my hypothetical paper might be interesting, and that's on page 96. Now, the good news here is I took this 14-page article. Boom. It's gone. And what I have here is I have 3 quotes that I think might be useful from that article. And now what I can do is move on to the next article. So we were talking about Norway. All right. So in this one, I'll grab now, here's another thing you can do. You can write notes to yourself, like use one of these quotes in body paragraph 3. That might be super helpful for you because now you can look back and you've written a note to yourself of that where you want to use one of these quotes. But then you can go to the next to the next article you have and find some quotes from that one. So, all right, so maybe this is a quote that I want. Look, this is a great one. The first sentence is a pretty good one. All right, and that's on page 2, or page 2. Okay. So let's look. I'm going to grab another quote from this, and then we'll be done because the dogs are going nuts. Let's just see if I can find one more juicy quote, and then we'll call it a day. All right, so let's just say that this is a quote that I want to use because the dogs are not having a good time. So I want to do that, and then let's see what page number that is. 17. So here, the long story short is this is a really helpful method to figure out what quotes you want to use from an article without having to keep on fiddling with a million different windows and forgetting which window was in, which quote was in which article and which one talked about what. The way that I do this is that, or the reason that I do this is so that when it comes time for me to start writing my paper, I already have quotes that I know I can use. They're already pulled. And if I need to, I can go look back at it again and see if there's something that I missed. But if you do this over and over again, it makes the research process way easier. And you don't necessarily have to do this with academic journal articles. You can do this with news articles on the website or on a website. You can do this with with books. You can do this with all sorts of things. But this is a very, very helpful way for you to do the research process. So overall, this is an overview both of how to read an academic journal article and how to sort of be smart about the way that you process your research. Notice, I didn't spend that much time actually reading the journal articles that I was quoting from. I sort of looked carefully at certain sections to see if there was anything useful there. That's the way that most people do it. Believe it or not, people don't actually read the whole thing. It's a way of doing research that is smarter and not harder. So that's the topic for today. Hope you got something out of it. If you have any questions about this, let me know, and I will see you in the next video.